Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, Ranking Member Gothright, Representative Rhodes. For some reason, this room feels very familiar. I don't quite know why, but it's always good to be back here. And the amendment that I brought forward to you today, thank you for taking the time to read it. I apologize for that. I was hopeful that my amended amendment would be in time for me to email the committee last night, but it wasn't, so I waited for this morning in time for me to be able to mark it and go up to HCS and produce some copies with what the amended amendment will be. Unfortunately, not an error of OLS, but an error of mine. There was on line 25 a missed word where it reads expunged. It should say annulled, but I've marked that on each of your sheets. HB196 was brought forward before the legislature last term by myself, and we had in this committee had some pretty thorough conversations about what the legislation was about and moving it forward to the House floor. Representative Rhodes, you and I had a really good debate on the House floor about it, always. And the legislation itself, what it does is allow people and initiate the Department of Safety to annul the crime of anyone who has a possession, misdemeanor, or violation level possession charge for cannabis offenses. The point behind the legislation is similar to what the spirit behind Governor Sununu's decriminalization law and its annulment provision was, which is the state is moving forward on this issue as other states have. I like to use the example of Colorado and Washington, other states that moved forward and allowed people to smoke, sell, and use this drug, but kept the record of people who had been arrested prior on their record. And what that did was stop them from get loans or get a job or with the federal government or other programs which restrict people from getting that job if they have such a charge on their record. These are people that have served their sentence, done the time, come out, and now the charge that they were incarcerated for is no longer being prosecuted, but they're still unable to get forward in life, which is the point of the criminal justice system, the rehabilitation side of it, because this charge is still on their record. So this legislation changed from the original version of HB196 would authorize the Department of Safety over the course of the next 18 months after passage to go through and expunge the records of anyone who has a misdemeanor or possession violation level possession offense for cannabis. It also allows for people, if they are missed in that 18 months, to petition the court to get an annulment. It doesn't allow for anyone who's currently serving a sentence get their annulment, or anyone who's about to be convicted to not be convicted. It doesn't allow for anyone who has any other charge other than the misdemeanor violation offense on their record to have that annulled. And if you're petitioning for your annulment, but you have, but the conviction of a misdemeanor charge included other charges, if you were arrested for selling, but it also included misdemeanor possession, et cetera, you would not be eligible for annulment. This is only for people that were arrested for violation level and misdemeanor cannabis offenses. Currently, with the annulment statute as it is, where people can petition the court, nobody has gone forward and petitioned the court. A group of lawyers have sought people to ask if they have under the current law, because you can, as I said in the beginning, under the current law, but they don't. And we've seen in states where this is implemented that people don't go forward because the form is cumbersome. We had testimony from lawyers who are working on this issue who said that when they looked at the form that their eyes glazed over because it was such a cumbersome form. And I imagine that I can't imagine that it would be easy for somebody that doesn't have the background and experience that a lawyer does to look at that form and to seek an annulment. So what this process does is make it a proactive process for annulments and allow people the opportunity to petition the court if they feel like they've been missed from that proactive process. There are 12 states that have implemented legislation, such as Oklahoma and Utah, that goes much beyond this. They call it clean slate laws, where essentially it's much more thorough wipe of people's records. That is not what we're doing here. This is a very simple proactive measure on one specific, the misdemeanor or violation offenses for cannabis possession over the course of people's lifetime. Right now, we're not necessarily prosecuting those offenses. We heard that in testimony last year, but people still do have it on their record from when the state was prosecuting these. So I think it's good if someone has shown that they've gone through the criminal justice system, they've served their time, to allow them to move forward in life, get their job, get their loan, and have their record expunged for this crime, which the state is no longer prosecuting in this way that is outlined in the bill before you here today. So thank you very much for your time, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you. I don't see a fiscal note on this, but yet it mandates the Department of Safety to go back and go through all these records. Did you have, or did anyone reach out to you to say, hey, that might cost some money? Did you hear anything?
Well, no doubt will cost some money, I think. I would imagine there would be a fiscal note.
I would think
eventually. So. This is the amendment as
does
it
the
was
original
just...
have the fiscal? Does that anyone have the original? Does it have a fiscal note? Indeterminable. Okay. That's not a good thing. Yeah. Go ahead. All right. Thank you. I was curious because it seems to me that it could be labor intensive for them to have to go back through and to figure. I don't even know if they have a way to do that. To search by who has been or has such a thing on their record. Did you reach out to the Department of Safety at all to ask about what the procedure would look like to kind of do this?
The Department of Safety and I had conversations last year, or in 2024 last year, but we haven't had conversations on this bill about the specifics. I would say that given the number of these charges, that I wouldn't say that there would be thousands of these charges that they would have to go through to look at. I wouldn't say it's extraordinarily labor intensive, and I would be open to any amendment that the committee has around changing some of those staffing.
I'm just more curious as to whether or not they have the technology to I mean, I've seen some things that are kind of scary. I don't know if they have systems that are linked or how they would be able to go do that. So we'll reach out to somebody from safety. Thank you. Representative Rhodes, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. I don't know if I'm looking at this wrong because it was just a real quick look over here, but there's a like basically a page 2 on the back, but it says about, hold on, I might be looking at, it says prior to January 25. I was thinking it was supposed to take effect, but that was getting carry on.
Okay.
Question withdrawn. Anyone else? Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I recently had some friends of mine who were accepted to an apartment, and then the landlord withdrew his offer after finding out that 10 years ago, one of them had been charged with possession while he was in college. And those charges were later dropped and he was found not guilty, but then it came up on the background report. And so the landlord withdrew the offer to move into this apartment.
Would you believe that?
Well, I'm asking more like, do you think that this bill would address that / like that annulment clears the record enough that those kind of situations wouldn't happen? Because I know annulment will still leave something available on some records. You know what I mean?
I can't speak to that specific case, but that's what I would say is the generalities of that case is why I'm bringing forward this legislation, because you have situations where people, but I'm, you know, in doing this legislation, I was thinking more of people in my mother's generation, but it's definitely college kids that were just there as well. But people from, you know, the 80s and the 90s, when this state was prosecuting this drug a little bit more intensely, a lot of it more intensely, that it's people go through situations like that. Oh, I'm not able to get my apartment. I'm not able to get my loan. I'm not able to get the job that I'm more than qualified for, and they're looking forward to me being a part of. I've heard anecdotes about that. What I would say is the annulment, I think, would solve that situation. There would be things left. There'd be a way to look at past records, or, you know, you can't annul a newspaper article, you know, but I think the fact that the court had come and said this is annulled, it gives that person the ability to go to that landlord or the boss at the job that they're looking for, or the bank, and say, yes, this did happen, but I took the proactive step and the state assisted in getting me this annulment, so that I have shown that I've been rehabilitated and I'm looking to move forward in life as a citizen participating in this community in the right way. Thank you.
I think to answer your question, annulment would not be available for like a landlord or an employee to see, employer, but it would remain available for law enforcement to see if they were running a background check for that purposes. Representative Scher.
And just to add to that, there is a law, New Hampshire law, I don't have the statute number right now, that says you can't ask the question, have you ever been convicted of a crime, without attaching that, have you ever been convicted of a crime that hasn't been annulled? So that's another layer to it.
I think the housing issue, though, might be a federal thing. Like if you're applying for federal housing, that
Yes,
you would be barred.
If you were applying for federal housing, then
Yeah.
that would definitely be the case.
Yeah, exactly. See no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your time.
good to
and
see you
members of the
again.
committee. Good to see you as always.